Hi, good morning. My name is Brian Massey, Member of Parliament for Windsor West and an NDP Great Lakes critic. Today I'm giving notice of a motion that will address concerns regarding the joint review panel process for the Ontario Power Generation's Deep Geological Repository. The proposed project will house low and intermediate levels of nuclear waste less than 2 kilometers from Lake Huron. I'm joined today by Doug Hunter and Dale Palin from the Inverhuron Committee, John Shifton, representing both Save Our Saugeen Shores and the Bluewater Coalition against DGRs, as well as Ms. Lloyd from Northwatch. The Inverhuron Committee is an incorporated entity of citizens who are opposed to the proposal. This community is part of the municipality of Kincardine, is located at Inverhuron Bay, adjacent to the Bruce nuclear site itself. Save Our Saugeen Shores is an incorporated community group from the municipality as well, also located immediately north of Kincardine. As well, the Bluewater Coalition against the DGRs is composed of citizens from Bruce, Huron, and Grey counties who share information and resource to inform the public on the nuclear waste issue. Northwatch is a regional coalition of environmental organizations, community groups, and individual members of the northeastern Ontario. And of course, I'm also joined by Carol Hughes, MP for Algolan, Manitoulin, Kapuskasing. Now, the motion to address this issue is important today because there needs to be a national discussion about nuclear waste products and the storage and the treatment of those products because they have a legacy for not only just ourselves but also for our children and our children's children. And this motion attempts to address the concerns raised by stakeholders with me today regarding the review process. The motion asks that any further review and approval of the project is deferred until such time as A, an independent technical body is established, so we have greater independence in the situation than we have right now. B, the body has completed an assessment of Canada's regulatory regime and its ability to support an environmental assessment and licensing review of the projects of this nature. So this ensures that we actually are going to have accountability in the process that's independent and is thorough. And C, there is a full evaluation of alternatives to the proposed deep geological repository. So there is an actual full examination as to even if this idea is the best and most sound scientific solution. And D, and finally, residents and stakeholders and rights holders along the Great Lakes are engaged in active dialogue. Now, why is this necessary? Well, the reason it's necessary is there is no consensus on the current situation that's taking place. There's been raised concerns about the environment, about the economies of this, and about the legacy that we would leave for, again, our children's children. And we're going to now have stakeholders come to the microphone and talk about the position that they have and the reasons for it. Myself, as a member of Parliament, I believe it's incredibly important that we're going to have a national dialogue about this, and it's not just left, I guess, out there and we just don't propose a solution. We need to actually lift the veil on this subject matter and have a proper, informed, mature discussion and also an evaluation of the consequences of the plan, whether it's the environment, whether it's the economy, whether it's what we're going to leave behind. We also know that we have U.S. stakeholders who have actually proposed legislation against this. We have U.S. stakeholders who have raised concerns against this. This is an international issue. It's not just a Canadian issue. They have been respecting nuclear waste issues in a very much a pragmatic approach on the U.S. side. They're raising concerns, and when that happens, I have concerns as a Canada-U.S. border critic for the New Democratic Party. Thank you.
Thank you. Brene Lloyd from Northwatch. Deep geological repositories as a concept, as an idea for the long-term storage and eventual abandonment of nuclear waste is loaded with uncertainties. The only thing that's certain is that it is fraught with uncertainties. And Ontario Power Generation's proposal for the burial of nuclear waste beneath the Bruce Nuclear Generating Station illustrates that in spades. In Canada, we have a regulatory deficit. Other jurisdictions that may be are considering the burial of nuclear waste, of radioactive waste, have a regime which looks very different from ours. They have independent technical bodies, such as in the U.S., or they have government agencies which are discrete from the energy agencies, which have the capacity to actually review these proposals. What we see in Canada is something very different. The federal agencies, such as Health Canada, Environment Canada, say quite clearly they don't have capacity. They don't have the technical expertise to review these kinds of proposals. And so this motion is very important because it calls for the much-needed independent oversight. We need an independent body that develops the technical expertise that can actually review and develop rules, regulations, guidelines, which we then have a sound regime by which to assess proposals that may come forward, such as Ontario Power Generations, and will have the technical strength that is currently missing in Canada in terms of evaluating proposals that may come forward, at any point into the future. So to have a proposal, a project which is loaded with uncertainties, which will have long-term consequences, which may not actually emerge for some time, and not have the regulatory strength, the regulatory ability to review, to assess, and then to monitor is just a recipe for disaster. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dale Palin, and I'm with the Inverhuron Committee. We are the closest community to the Bruce nuclear site, and we are longtime residents. All members of the Executive Committee of the Inverhuron Committee have been going up to, well, are at least third generation. We go back, our grandchildren are fifth generation. We go back to the 1900s when we started going up there. And we realized that we were not aware of the project until about 2 years ago. And we felt it was our responsibility to get it out to people, to let them know what is happening. And if people that are as close to it as we are didn't know about it, then other people wouldn't know about it. And we felt it was important to get out there to people and to get a dialogue out there. And so we're supporting this motion today to let us discuss it.
I'm Doug Hunter. I'm with the Inverhuron Committee as well with Dale. And first of all, thanks to the folks already spoken, to Brian and Brene and Dale on this subject. Very critical subject. I'll just refer a little bit to the risks that Brene talked about. This material that's being stored, it's intermediate and low-level waste. So intermediate waste, for instance, has a half-life of about 100,000 years. And so when you think about that, who can predict, what computer model can ever predict what's going to happen in 100,000 years? 10,000 years ago, the very site where our cottage sits on Inverhuron Bay, right beside the Bruce nuclear power plant, was covered in water. It was a whole body of water that covered that area. So who knows what's going to happen in another 10,000 years or 50,000 years? And I think we have to be respectful for the future generations. We can't find a solution that won't stand the test of time, and that's a critical issue. The issue, too, here is that they've looked at this whole issue of burying nuclear waste does not have good precedents. All around the world, there are very few examples of it. The one that was a shining star example in New Mexico, Carlsbad, New Mexico, recently had a failure in it. And so the concern is that there just is not precedents to say this stuff makes sense and the way to store this makes sense. We have advancing technology. I think that over time, over the next many years, we will find solutions that may be better than what we're thinking of those today as technology and science advances. So we're hopeful that there will be a solution to it. We're not anti-nuclear in any way. We just feel strongly about this issue about burying waste within a kilometer of the lake does not make sense at this point given what's happened in the past and what could happen in the future. Thank you.
My name is John Sifton. I'm from both an organization called Save Our Saugeen Shores. Saugeen Shores is the municipality immediately north of Kincardine. And I'm also here as a spokesperson for the Bluewater Coalition Against the DGR, which represents municipalities all around that area. And, you know, one of the misunderstandings, misconceptions is that somehow that area is willing to have this thing. And nothing could be further than the truth. There has been no referendum. with proper rules to test what people really think about it. 2 polls have been done by through the auspices of the municipality of Kincardine and OPG. Also, those polls, the one in Kincardine, it omitted entirely the words nuclear and radioactive from the question. Sounded like they were talking about the question was whether you wanted some modification in your landfill processes. The second question, the second poll, ignored entirely seasonal residents, which form about 20 to 25% of the population up there. Millions of dollars have gone to local municipalities, but I don't think that these councillors represent the people up there. It's quite astonishing and quite disgraceful in many ways. And beyond this, let's even assume, even if this community was willing, which is not the case, why should one community be saying yay without all the other communities around, downstream communities on the Great Lakes, being consulted? This is just not happening. It's just being rushed through. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to turn over questions, but in conclusion, I just want to thank all our partners here in this issue. It's one that's open to all members of Parliament and to all parties. This is an open-door process, and we're encouraging members, especially along the Great Lakes region, to get engaged on this issue. But what we're talking about is the most important fresh water supply in the world. And it's also very much an economic issue because it's actually integrated with our transportation systems for goods and services that go to most often to our trading partner, the United States, but also to other jurisdictions across the planet. So, today we're launching the campaign for a more thorough, robust review and more inclusive review than the current system that we have here right now. And we're very much open and available for organizations, groups, and citizens that care about this issue is to get engaged with us and to offer some valuable input and as well, too, hopefully some support. Because I believe that we take the Great Lakes for granted far too much. This is one of those cases, and I think we need it's time to change. Thank you.
Kevin Baker-Vokes, freelance reporter. I was hoping to be able to get a bit more of expansion on what exactly has happened or what you've heard now from the American cities on what exactly their concerns are. From my understanding, you now have, on the American side, you end up having some, I guess it's a combination, actually, of a couple of different groups, not only just mayors, but it sounds like now congressmen and others are now starting to get involved with this.
Yeah, Congressman Debbie Stabenow, who I just recently saw at a meeting, actually, related to the Windsor-Detroit crossing about a month ago, has wrote a letter to John Kerry about this. It's gone to that high level, and then you also have other elected officials from the Michigan State Senate as well that have actually expressed concern. Senator Hopgood, for example, also Congresswoman Sarah Roberts, and Congressman Dan Kildee is another one, as well as that we have Congressman Marcy Kaptur from Ohio even expressing concern about this. So this is running through the American system at a significant level, and they have laws that prevent nuclear waste storage from 10 miles of the Great Lakes. So I don't think they're looking very positively over here on the Canadian side when they see us flirting with this type of situation when they have actually made a defining statement already through legislation, and also addressing it to John Kerry goes just basically to the presidential administration. So it's significant.
We don't have anything in place, from my understanding, from what you're saying, is that we don't have anything in place that says basically nothing within so many kilometers of.
No, we're totally vacant of that. I don't know if anybody wants to. Yeah, we're totally. Yeah, it's and hence, I mean, this is why we're not just saying no with this motion, is that what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a more detailed process so that we just don't go from crisis to crisis about where we put this material, and we have to deal with it. I mean, so it's time we had a mature, responsible discussion about it that's open in the public and it's robust enough that it includes everybody. Everybody's, yeah. Yep. You want to say?
Just including First Nations as well. I think they have a critical role to play in this.
Yeah, the microphone. Yeah, no, good point, Carol. Please
Sorry,
add that.
so I'm Carol Hughes, a Member of Parliament for Algoma, Manitou, and Kapuskasing, and a lot of the communities that are vying for some of these projects, or at least for one of these projects, is within my riding. And I think that it's important for them to have those discussions, but at the same time, we, as was mentioned before, we need to make sure that the other communities are part of those discussions. And more importantly, we need to ensure that First Nations are part of those discussions. When it comes to water, we can't take chances. And with the relaxation of legislation, especially on the environmental front, whether it's the Navigable Waters Act or other legislations that the government has toyed with, I think that it's evident why these people are here raising the issue at this critical moment.
Questions that I have is whether or not some of the recent changes within, I'm thinking the Fisheries Act, but a couple of others, whether or not they have basically opened up the door to allow some of these things.
It definitely has. I mean, there's no doubt that our legislation related to the environment and the treatment of water and in Environmental Assessment Act as well has been dumbed down since I've been here. It's gone through a couple of changes. And so I don't believe they're sufficient and they're strong enough. And that's why against the motion and why we're trying to approach this in a very positive, outward way that is inclusive to other parties and is not closing doors on things, but is basically, asking for more thorough investigation and more, again, robust type of application. And when we're looking at something so serious as nuclear waste, I mean, we can't. There's no second chance on this stuff. There's no second chance.
One of the other questions was, which was generated actually because I spoke with the mayor actually this morning, and he was characterizing it as well. This is supported, and that there's. He was saying that it makes perfect sense based on the geology of the area, and I guess one of my questions is whether or not there has been an assessment within that region at all. And if so, by whom?
I don't know. Do you have it? Yeah.
So, Brene Lloyd from Northwatch. There is an ongoing review being conducted by what's called a joint review panel, and it's a joint panel appointed by the Canadian Environmental Assessment through the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency and the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. That is reviewing the Ontario Power Generation proposal, which was filed in 2011, panel appointed 2012. Hearing started in 2013 and was expected to go for 3 weeks. The panel added an additional week, then adjourned, provided additional requests for information, and has now announced that it will reconvene. And that is because Ontario Power Generation's proposal is both incomplete and fraught with uncertainties. So there is a review underway. The panel is handicapped by not having a sound set of regulations by which to assess the proposal. So I think that the number of additional information requests that they have put forward reflects the challenges that they've met in this review process. And we don't know what the outcome will be. But they are limited by not having a sound set of rules by which to assess the project. So it is a federal decision initially. Later the province will have to decide if they go forward with it or not, but it is a federal decision. But there's really, large questions about whether the federal government has the system in place to actually evaluate these projects.
It's hard enough to predict when we'll actually have another Canadian team win the Stanley Cup. It's even more difficult to predict what's going to actually happen 10,000 and 100,000 years from now. So, but the bottom line is that we're leaving it behind for somebody, for some people. And we're not taking care of the situation. You just can't put stuff in the basement and see what happens. It's wrong. And with all due respect, I mean, I just think that, if this is really serious, and you're serious about doing this, then the highest degree of scrutiny is the very least we can do and the most that we should expect. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, please.
I just wanted to add to a point made earlier. In the hearing, Ontario Power Generation can be presumed to have tried to put their best foot forward, but it was really a misstep in a number of ways. And one example is they relied on the waste isolation pilot plant in New Mexico as their best example of international experience, which was to comfort the panel and the public that this kind of waste management system was sound. Well, we've seen since February the waste isolation pilot plant has unraveled. Underground fire, then releases of radioactivity to the surface. It took 2 months to identify what the source of the radioactivity was, where it was even coming from in the repository, and another month to identify what the cause was, and they still are grappling with how to manage the situation now. And there is a probability that the waste isolation pilot plant will remain permanently closed. So that's the best Ontario Power Generation could offer in terms of examples, and I think it was a telling one.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you very much, and I'd like to thank all the organizations and Carol as well, and we look forward to moving forward on this issue. Thank you.